Assalamu alaikum, comrades. I'm a Muslim and a communist. And I know to many that sounds impossible. People ask me, how do I reconcile that? How can I be both? And to that I say there's nothing to reconcile. They're not opposites. In fact, they've both been misunderstood by each other and by history. Let's start with the most quoted and misquoted thing Marx ever said. Religious suffering is, at one and the same time, the expression of real suffering and a protest against real suffering. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of the soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. In the full context, you can see that Marx wasn't mocking religion itself. He was describing it as something people turn to in pain. Not because they're weak, but because the world, their material conditions, hurt. He saw religion as a survival mechanism, a way to hold onto humanity in a brutal world. To him, religion wasn't the enemy, capitalism was. The goal wasn't to take away comfort, it was to build a world where people didn't need to numb the pain. Often, the Marxist critique on religion is how man uses it to control people, not personal faith practice, but how it's manipulated and abused by man. And communists, Marxists, don't worship Marx. You don't have to agree with absolutely everything he ever said in his life. I personally think that even if we achieve communism, human beings will still yearn for something spiritual. And speaking of that feeling of yearning for the spiritual, let's talk about materialism. When Marxists say materialism, they don't mean greed or consumerism, they mean a doctrine that social consciousness is determined by social being. That is, the material conditions of life. How we live, our housing, labor, food, safety, it shapes our beliefs, not the other way around. Or as Marx said, life is not determined by consciousness, but consciousness by life. So when people say that religion is idealist, they're missing the point. Faith lives in the material world. Whether I can pray, fast, or study the Quran depends on whether I'm safe, housed, or fed. Faith isn't anti-materialist, it responds to material conditions. And that's not un-Marxist, it's dialectical materialism in action. The faith practice makes me feel something real. It affects my day-to-day and how I interact with the material world. Another common myth is that communism has historically banned religion, which as a broad statement is not true. If you're talking about the Soviet Union, what the early Soviets did was challenge religious institutions that hoarded power and wealth, like the Orthodox Church under the Tsars. In 1920, Stalin said this, one of many examples where people's personal religious beliefs and practices coincided with the growth of a growing socialist state. Depending on the time and region in the Soviet Union, mosques were open, Islamic schools operated. Islam wasn't erased, faith was allowed. What wasn't allowed was exploitation, proselytizing, or abusive faith-based pressures. And while I'm using myself and Islam as an example, it's not just about me. All over the global South, faith and revolution walked hand in hand. Famously, there's liberation theory in Latin America. The liberation theory, or liberation theology, declared God is on the side of the oppressed. Faith has always fueled resistance, not contradicted it. A society where people are fed, housed, and safe isn't a threat to religion. It's the ideal condition for it. Like Gramsci said, pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. Che Guevara said, the true revolutionary is guided by a great feeling of love. My Islam gives me that love. My communism gives me that way to fight with it. Because justice, care, and solidarity aren't political goals exclusively. They're spiritual ones too. I don't need to reconcile being Muslim and a communist. There's nothing to reconcile. Both have been widely misunderstood, purposefully so, orchestrated, paid for, misconstrued, mainly by the West. Because to have us fighting each other and not having this common ground is beneficial for those in power, for control. Personal faith practice and an understanding of political theory and the history of liberation and revolution, those are dangerous things to know to those who want to control you. Don't you think?